What's going on, everybody, and welcome to my review of Hell of a Summer. This is a slasher comedy film about a group of camp counselors who are being terrorized by a deranged mass killer. Gee, I don't think I've seen a movie like that before.
Huh. This place feels kind of familiar somehow.
But in all seriousness, this is a film I've been eager to check out since the first trailer dropped at the beginning of the year, and my main point of intrigue with this movie is that it was being co-written, co-directed, and co-starred in by the duo of Bryk and Wolfhard. Now, admittedly, Bryk is not someone I'm familiar with. I know these two have collabed in the past, but this was my introduction to him. However, Wolfhard has been a household name for many years now, thanks to the massive success of Stranger Things, as well as being in films such as It Chapters 1 and 2, and the latest Ghostbusters films. With roles such as those under his belt, it's clear that he is no stranger to the horror genre as far as being in front of the camera is concerned. So I was interested in seeing what he, with Bryk by his side, could do behind the camera, specifically in what I consider to be horror's best subgenre, slashers. Slashers are kind of my thing. In the past, I've referred to myself as being a bit of a slasher slut. They're my all-time favorite subgenre in all of film, and as long as it's not Mickey Mouse or Winnie the Pooh that's running around doing all the killings, there's a very good shot that at the very least, I will have a good time. So being that I am a massive slasher fan, this was already a movie I was immediately looking forward to checking out the second I caught wind of it. But the fact that it's also a comedy slasher was another thing I was excited about, and judging off of that first trailer, I was confident that they were going to be able to pull off both sides successfully. In my opinion, comedy in film has been on life support for a long time now. We just do not get comedies of the quality that we used to, and so during this time, horror comedies for me have really been the saving grace. I think the horror genre has produced some of the funniest movies of the past decade. Historically, slashers have always lent themselves really well to the comedy genre. Some of horror's most iconic franchises, such as Nightmare on Elm Street and Child's Play, both heavily implement comedy into their movies, and even a more recent example in the past couple of months, we got Heart Eyes, another slasher comedy that I really enjoyed and thought was hilarious from start to finish. So due to all these things that I have mentioned, I was very optimistic going into this movie, and coming off a Screamboat, I desperately needed a slasher movie that could deliver an enjoyable experience. But did I get that enjoyable experience with Hell of a Summer, or was this movie just hell? Well, before I get into that, I'd like to ask that while you're here, go ahead and give the video a like and subscribe to the channel as well for more movie reviews. Make sure to get down in the comments below and tell me all your thoughts on Hell of a Summer. Make sure to tell me some of your all-time favorite slashers too while you're at it. I'd love to hear from you guys. Now let's get into the review. Starting with the positives, and what I enjoyed the most about this movie is just the general vibe that it's going for, as well as just the chemistry and the dynamics amongst the entire cast. I know I joked in the intro about how familiar this story and setting is for this kind of movie, but there's a reason it's been done so many times. It just works. If slashers have taught me one thing, it's that if I were to ever have a kid and they ask to go to summer camp, the answer is no. You will not be going. You will be spending your summers with dad, because clearly your chances of getting chopped up by a psycho in a mask greatly increase when you decide that you want to start getting close with nature.
But I hate nature. I hate nature.
Maybe only to be outdone by babysitters, camp counselors and camp goers have always been prime victims for slashers. Friday the 13th built an entire franchise off the backs of simply just that. And once again, that setup and setting works really well for Hell of a Summer. I would describe this movie as what you would get if you were to take Wet Hot American Summer and Sleepaway Camp and mash them together, and I think that is what made this movie so fun and enjoyable. I enjoyed all the characters this movie gave us. I love the chemistry between all of them. Slashers like this need a strong batch of survivors, and I think this movie had that in spades. Each character represents a specific archetype that, yes, much like the camp setup, is very familiar and maybe a bit overused, but I think this film is very aware of that, and it's done with intent because they're all written in a very tongue-in-cheek, unsubtle way. If the comedy hadn't worked for me, then this could have easily been something that landed in the negative portion of this movie review, because if they weren't funny, I probably would have just found all these characters to be really annoying, but the comedy did work for me, and each character gets their moments, and they all had a very high success rate at making me laugh. Bryk as the character of Bobby honestly stole the show with his performance, in my opinion, and like I said, this is my first time ever seeing a performance of his, and I guess going in I just assumed that Wolfhard would be the standout given the name value, but every line that Billy delivered had me absolutely rolling, and he's by far who I think was the funniest of all the characters. I also want to give praise to Fred Heckinger. He's essentially the closest thing you get to a lead character in this movie, and I really enjoyed what he brought to the film, and he did a really good job, so I want to shout him out as well. Shifting my focus to behind the camera now because going in, that's what a lot of my intrigue was based off of. Like I said at the top, this is being co-written and co-directed by Billy Bryk and Finn Wolfhard. For Billy, these are his debuts in both those regards. Finn has a couple writing and directing credits under his belt, but you would still consider both to be early in their careers in these specific roles. And I gotta say, I liked a lot of what they did here. I don't think they reinvented the wheel or anything, and they clearly wear their influences on their sleeves as young filmmakers, but I say that in a very complimentary way. They definitely knew how to create a slasher vibe that I know very well and love very much. The first thing I must give them credit for is that they understood the assignment when it comes to making a slasher movie, and they kept the blood and gore practical. It's not the bloodiest or goriest slasher movie of all time, more on that a little bit later, but the little that we do get is made so much better because they decided to use practical effects over CGI, and that just warms my little slasher loving heart. So bravo guys. Well done. The sense of humor within the writing was right up my alley, and the overall aesthetic that they are able to create felt both nostalgic and modern. There were moments in this movie where I couldn't even tell what era we were set in because it felt so vintage, like 70s, 80s, and 90s, but then out of nowhere someone would whip out an iPhone and I would be like, oh yeah, this is set in modern day. But that throwback feeling that they were able to establish is what made me enjoy this movie so much, and it has me excited to see what this duo can do as directors moving forward. There could come a day where I'm more excited to see their names in the directors and writers column than I am in the actors column, because judging off of this little taste, I definitely think there is some real potential there for the both of them. Moving on to the negatives, and as much as I enjoyed this film, it's not perfect, and oddly enough, for being an enjoyable slasher film, the actual slasher aspect of it is what actually ended up being the most underwhelming. I think it would be fair to describe this movie as more of a teen comedy than a full-on slasher, because typically when a slasher implements comedy, the slasher feels like the ice cream with the comedy being the sprinkles, but in Hell of a Summer, the comedy felt more like the ice cream with the slasher being the sprinkles.
When the fuck did we get ice cream?
Everything dealing with the killer in this movie is pretty forgettable. The look with the mask, the reveal, the motives, it's all pretty generic surface level slasher stuff that we have seen a ton. Something that I think could have really helped this killer out is if the kills had been more impressive. For being an R-rated movie, it doesn't really seem like they take full advantage of that. A lot of these kills you could have gotten away with putting in a PG-13 slasher movie. There's a lot of kills in this movie where they do cutaways while the blows are being landed. There's a lot of kills that happen off screen and we only get to see the end result of. There's also a lot of kills where we don't get to see the full damage that is taking place as a result of the kill. And so because of that, I think that's a failed opportunity to help uplift what on the surface was an uninteresting killer, because there are a lot of slasher movies where the killer wasn't that intriguing, but through the creativity of the kills, they were able to make them memorable. And I think that's something that Hell of a Summer could have done to prop up this otherwise uninteresting killer. So if you're going into this movie hoping to get a slasher where the slashing and the killer is the primary focus, I don't really think you're going to get that here. The killer here is dime a dozen and doesn't do anything special enough to stand out amongst the crowded field of other slashers. This is definitely more of a movie that is driven by the hilarity of its characters, and so I could see a lot of slasher fans coming out of this film a bit disappointed. So there you guys have it. Those are all my thoughts on Hell of a Summer. This is kind of a weird one for me because at the top of the video, I stated that I was in desperate need of a slasher movie that could deliver an enjoyable experience. And that's exactly what I got with this film, but the slasher elements had nothing to do with that. And you know what? I don't care. This movie was absolutely hilarious and had me laughing all the way through. So despite it being a slasher that lacks in the slashing, I would be lying if I said I did not have a great time watching it. For the score here, I'm giving Hell of a Summer a 7 out of 10. Slasher purists may be a bit upset to discover that what they're getting here is more akin to an American Pie film than it is a Friday the 13th film. But when I take a step back and I look at the state of comedy films and the state of horror films, I'm actually finding myself valuing this movie more for being able to make me laugh as much as it did, because that's just not an experience I'm getting from movies nearly as much as I used to. But let me know what you guys think about Hell of a Summer down in the comments below. If you haven't seen it, are you going to be checking it out? If you have seen it, what did you think about it? Did you like it? Were you disappointed that it didn't focus as much on the slasher side of things? I'd love to hear everything you guys have to say down there. Also, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel as well for more movie reviews, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.